and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me on tonight's episode is Bill Werde, the director of the Bandier program at the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. Bill serves as the director of the top-ranked Bandier Music Industry program in the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. He's the creator of Full Rate No Cap, the influential weekly email of music industry analysis, and he's the former editorial director of Billboard. At Billboard, he built a global network of music industry relationships and a deep understanding of industry trends and mass audience development and engagement across platforms. Now, he teaches the next generation of music industry leaders, focusing his work on emerging tech and emerging markets. He's a frequent guest expert on music and the music business for top news and media outlets, and he currently resides in Syracuse, New York. So, Bill, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you on. How's it going?
It's going good. Busy, but busy with a lot of good things. And like even today in particular, it's just a day where I'm blessed to have a bunch of meetings and different conversations where all I'm going to do today is think about this crazy business that we work in, that we love, that drives us crazy. So yeah, it's a good day.
Busy is always good. All right, are you ready for your first question?
I don't know that I can ever be ready for hard-hitting questions like this, but I'm going to do my best.
Imagine for a second you're sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note, and what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
Yeah, this is the hardest question, and I have to say too, right up front, I'm never on this side of the question, so it's an interesting turn for me. I'm always the one asking the questions. On a personal level, I would say, if I'm being really, really honest, I would go back and tell my 25-year-old self to really figure out who you are and why you are that person. I think it took me until I was like 30, 35, and like a whole lot of therapy to figure out that I was kind of, and I think a lot of people do this, I was kind of living my life in reaction to things that happened to me when I was a kid. I was living my life in reaction to things that happened to me when I was a teenager. And you don't have to do that. There's options. Like it is a choice. And so I just think, I think I was probably like angrier than I needed to be. I think the chip on my shoulder was bigger than it needed to be. It's complicated because on some levels, I think that need to prove myself is what set me up to have a long career. It's what created the momentum that I rode into some pretty cool opportunities. But at the same time, I think there's probably a way I could have done those same things and been a little healthier. On the professional side, I think it's really just that as much as results matter, I turned 50 this year. And when I look back on some of the key moments I had running Billboard or being the CEO of an agency or these sorts of things, people ultimately matter a lot more than results. And the things that I think I spent a lot of time focused on and obsessing over when I was in those jobs, when I look back now, it's not what I think about. I'm not like, oh, I won this award. Oh, I made this list. Right. It's none of those things. I'm proud of the accomplishments that like the teams that I got to work with delivered. But now when I look back, it's really about the relationships you build, right? The most valuable thing I have as a 50-year-old are the people that I've now had 25, 30-year relationships with in this business. Ultimately, yes, if you don't get the results, you don't get to stay in the game. But the people are so much more, just more important. I just wish I was probably softer, kinder, like had more patience, had more empathy for other people's experiences, things like that. If I did have it to do over again, that's probably where I would go.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Before we jump into the next question, I'm curious to know, is jumping into the world of teaching and working at a university something that you saw for yourself when you were younger? How did you kind of get into that space?
Well, it's kind of funny. When I first went to college at the University of Delaware, I wanted to be a high school English teacher, and I failed out of school. I went back and got my degree, but I was on a bus or a train every weekend going up and down the 95 corridor to catch music, raves, especially clubs, hip hop shows, things like that. And it turned out that was not a lifestyle that was conducive to getting great grades. And so when I came back, they told me I was registering for like my ed psych courses, and they were like, you can't be a teacher anymore. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, your grades aren't good enough to student teach in the state of Delaware, so you got to pick something else. I mean, in retrospect, I'm sure there was a way I could have been a teacher. So, short answer, yeah, like it was always kind of in my mind. Like my dad was a teacher, my mom was a teacher, they were public school teachers, and teaching was always kind of in my blood. But I always thought it was something that I would do when I was like 50 or 55. But when the opportunity to be the director of the Bandier program came up, it took me a little time to think it through. But ultimately it was just like, I mean, there's like three, four, five like truly great programs at this level. And I don't know that there's going to be an opportunity for me to be the director of one of them when I'm ready for it. And I just felt like if this was the right opportunity, if there's something I wanted to do in my lifetime, maybe the timing wasn't perfect, but I felt like the opportunity was, and so I jumped into it. And it seemed like such a big, scary choice at the time. I had a family. We were living in Westchester, like just north of New York City. Great neighborhood, great schools, like everything seemed great. And I was like, you know what we should do? We should move the whole family to Syracuse. Uh, didn't go over well initially. But now, I mean, with the benefit of hindsight and looking back on this choice 8 years ago, the best decision I ever made. I am so lucky, and I really get to live my passions almost every day, and there is no salary or very few other things in life that are worth that. Yeah.
All right, next question. Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they could be good. So, what's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Yeah, so I kind of interpret this question as like I think a lot about conventional wisdom. I put out this weekly email most weeks when school's in session, full rate no cap. And the reason I write it is because I see so many bad takes, right? Like I think sometimes it's understandable. Sometimes my students might confuse the number of a person's followers with the amount of sense they have in their head or their credibility to share an opinion. And I think that is like the undoing of our society in a lot of ways. But that's a whole other discussion, maybe for a different podcast. So I hear this question of like, what are the secrets? And I think a lot about things that I deeply believe that other people seem to not believe. And for me, I would say it's a tie. And the two things I would pick are basically different sides of the same sandwich, and that is Spotify and Ticketmaster are not the Antichrist. I will die on this hill. People want to just tear apart Spotify. And I think most of the people I see complaining about it, it falls into one of two buckets. Either you don't understand the way revenue works in the music business, or for whatever reason, and I do not know why, you feel like you are entitled to make a living with your music, even though most people don't seem to like it. And so, like, listen, if you're getting a lot of streams and you're the sole writer on a song, you're doing okay. The other thing with Spotify too that everyone seems to miss in these like let's bash Spotify sessions, and it really has become conventional wisdom. Spotify is like responsible for whatever, like a third of the global music industry revenue, and people just kick the crap out of it all the time. Spotify's basically paying, and listen, let me be clear, Spotify's not a saint, right? Some of the way they've treated songwriters, some of their negotiations, you've seen the NMPA, the National Music Publishers Association, come out, and you should Google that stuff. And Spotify should be a better actor on that front, no question. But Spotify's basically paying out about 70% of its music related revenue. And that's basically what we've been seeing any company pay out in the entire digital age dating back to iTunes. And no one was like, iTunes is the Antichrist. People were like, iTunes is saving the music business. While iTunes was not saving the music business, iTunes was saving the Apple business. We've got, like, if from that era, if you were around, right, people are buying these podcasts. They play 2,000 songs, they're buying iPods and they play 5,000 songs. They play 10,000 songs. But the average iPod purchaser bought, like, I think the stat was like 13 or 16 songs from iTunes, right? Apple didn't save the music business. Apple saved Apple with the iPod. But no one says that, right? Everyone's like, no, Spotify's the Antichrist. But like, I'm one of 16 writers on this hip hop track that has 3,000 streams, and I'm mad that I'm not getting a check for $4 million. Like, come on. I don't know if this is interesting to you. I mean, I can give you the same breakdown on Ticketmaster if you want to hear my rants.
Go
Uh,
for it.
well, it's just like, again, with Ticketmaster, the number one thing that I always see is like people want to blame Ticketmaster for prices, and Ticketmaster just doesn't set the prices. Taylor Swift sets the prices. Also, like Ticketmaster doesn't determine when they're going to sell the tickets. Taylor Swift doesn't want sites crashing. Here's an idea. Don't take what we can largely expect to be the biggest tour in like the last decade or 2 decades or ever and put every date on sale at the same time. I've heard from people who are very close to that deal that she was advised on that and really wanted to make that splash. Go ahead, give it that flex. Cool. But like, I guess if you really want to be hardcore, you could call it a Ticketmaster tech problem. But I will point out that SeatGeek sold, I think, 7 of those shows when Eras Tour first went on sale. It might have been more than that. And they had the exact same problems that Ticketmaster had. The fundamental problem in the touring industry, and no one really likes to talk about this, is there's way, way, way too much demand for way, way, way too few seats. Like you can control this if you're the artist. You can do a much better job. Or you can stick your head in the sand and let people blame Ticketmaster. But it's your fans that are getting screwed. And I will do everything I can to educate fans on the fact that their artists, their favorite artists, have a lot more control of this, because that's what will change this.
Totally great point. All right, last question. Throughout your career, I can only imagine you've been asked plenty of questions, whether it was for an industry conference, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question, and what would be your answer?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, to paraphrase the great Heisenberg, Walter White, like I'm the one who knocks, right? Like I don't get asked a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions. So I can't think of a time in the last like decade where I've been on this side of the question. So I guess I would put it this way. Like I interpret this question as like, what wisdom do I have to share that maybe I haven't been given enough of an opportunity to share with other people? And I will say, like in the Band Your Masters program and the Band Your program, I share this all the time, but I've focused a lot in my thinking and throughout my career on why certain people succeed and why certain people don't. And I think that that's natural given that like I grew up in Delaware, my dad was a school teacher, I failed out of college, I got fired from my first job, right? And then, 7 years later I was running Billboard. I don't know. I like on a spiritual level, I mean, I feel like I've so enormously exceeded my ceiling. I mean, I wake up every day just grateful for the house money that I'm playing with. And I really do mean that. And at the same time, there's certain choices I made, certain things that I learned along the way. And so I think that people want there to be this like big idea, this Instagram meme. If they just read the right Instagram meme, like they'll have the right inspiration and the right mindset, and then they will succeed. And I just think it's unfair. Like I think it's cruel. I think that approach, which I know a lot of people have, I'm going to feed myself inspiration through my scroll. If I just have the right mindset, I'll conquer all. It's like, no, you won't. Like, you need skills, you need work ethic, you need tools. So, I mean, I think the things that ultimately make people succeed, right? They're not big ideas. Mark Cuban gets credit for a quote that I love. And I actually interviewed him at a conference once, and he said he didn't say it, but it's a great quote. He's happy to take credit for it. And that is people come to him all the time and they say that they have $1 million ideas. And he says, I have a filing cabinet full of $1 million ideas. I just need $100 worth of execution. And I love that, man. I think, it's the most fundamental things. Like, do you know what to do when you're afraid? Right? Because fear stops everyone. Everyone has great ideas. Everyone even has good intentions. 99% of the people that I see out there that aren't doing the right thing, aren't succeeding, aren't on the path they want to be on, 99% of those people, they're not lazy. They just lack the tools. So you're in that situation, you don't know the next step, you're afraid of failure, but it's like on a subconscious level. And most people just kind of go fetal in one way or the other. Most people don't have a system to be organized. Most people struggle to take like a big idea, break it down into small parts, and then enter those small parts into their system. So that when you wake up on that Thursday next week and you are feeling a little afraid or a little less than, or imposter syndrome is taking over, you've got calendar entries, and all you need to do is put left foot over right. And instead of wasting a day and then, feeling even more less than as you think about this idea you're not getting to, you're just grinding. There are many different definitions of professionalism, but I think consistency might be one of the most important ones. Learning to love your best work. That's all you could do on any given day. And the people that succeed, they learn to love their best work. They put it out there. They let it oxidize in the universe. They crave that oxidation, even when it's scary and it hurts and it's ugly and it's not, hey, good job, you're awesome. And instead, it's like, you know what? The universe is telling me I'm not ready for this moment yet, but that doesn't mean I won't be. It doesn't mean I'm the wrong person for that moment. This is my opportunity to get a little bit better today. And so, yes, some of that is mindset, but almost all of it, in my opinion, is tools. It's the things we do every day. We are not our intentions. We are what we do.
We've reached the end of tonight's episode, but Bill, thank you again for joining me. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. To everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. See you next time.